The year was 1878, and the small mining town in the Montana Territory buzzed with a restless energy that had nothing to do with the gold veins running dry in the nearby hills. A crowd had gathered in the muddy clearing that served as the town square, their faces illuminated by flickering torchlight. Men, women, and even a few children stood shoulder to shoulder, their breaths visible in the chilly morning air, their eyes fixed on the crude wooden platform at the center of the square. A gallows, hastily erected from warped timber and coarse rope, loomed over the scene like a grim sentinel. On that platform stood Mara Elk Runner, a young Blackfoot woman, her hands bound tightly behind her back with rough hemp. The rope around her neck was heavy, its coarse fibers biting into her skin, but she stood tall, her dark eyes steady despite the hatred radiating from the crowd below. Her long black hair, usually braided neatly, hung loose and tangled from the rough handling she'd endured when they dragged her from her camp 2 days ago. The mob wanted Blackfoot blood, and they didn't care whether Mara was guilty of the crime they'd pinned on her. To them, her heritage was evidence enough. The townsfolk of Eden's Hollow had suffered losses in recent months. Raids on outlying homesteads had left families destitute, their livestock stolen, their barns burned to ash. The whispers in the saloons and churches alike pointed to the Blackfoot, whose camps dotted the hills beyond the town. To the settlers, every native was a potential raider, every shadow a threat. Mara, caught alone while gathering herbs near the river, had been an easy target, a scapegoat for their fear and grief. They'd accused her of leading a raid that killed a prominent rancher, Samuel Kerr, and stole his prized horses. The truth, that she'd been miles away tending to her ailing father, didn't matter. They saw her high cheekbones, her dark skin, and the defiance in her eyes, and they saw guilt. Sheriff Amos Tate stood beside the platform, his weathered face slick with sweat despite the cold. His hand rested on the butt of his revolver, fingers twitching as if unsure whether to draw it to maintain order or to join the mob's fervor. He avoided Mara's gaze, his eyes darting nervously between the crowd and the noose. He was a man caught in a storm of his own making, too weak to challenge the town's collective rage, but too aware of the moral weight to be comfortable with it. "Let's get this over with," a voice bellowed from the crowd, a burly man in a dirt-streaked coat, his beard flecked with tobacco juice. Others took up the cry, their voices blending into a chorus of vengeance that echoed off the clapboard buildings lining the square. Mara's eyes scanned the faces below, searching for a single spark of doubt or compassion. She found none. Men with calloused hands gripped pitchforks or rifles. Women clutched shawls tightly round their shoulders, their lips pressed into thin lines of righteous anger. Even the children, who should have been home dreaming of simpler things, stared up at her with wide, unblinking eyes, as if she were a monster from a bedtime story. A woman near the front, her face etched with grief, stepped forward and spat at the platform. "Murderer," she screamed, her voice raw with pain. "You killed my Samuel, you and your filthy kind." The crowd roared in approval, their hatred swelling like a river after a storm. Mara wanted to speak, to tell them she'd been tending her father's fever when Kerr was killed, that she'd never held a weapon in her life, but she knew they wouldn't listen. To them, she was not Mara Elk Runner, daughter of a healer, a woman who knew the songs of her people and the secrets of the plants that grew in the hills. She was simply Blackfoot, a word they spat like a curse. The woman who'd screamed picked up a stone from the muddy ground and hurled it with surprising force. It struck Mara's thigh, sending a jolt of pain through her leg. She stumbled but refused to fall, her jaw tightening as she straightened her spine. More stones followed, each one met with cheers from the crowd as if they were watching a carnival act. Instead of an act of cruelty, courage is not the absence of fear, her father had once told her, his voice soft as he taught her to weave baskets by the fire. It is standing tall when fear tries to bend you. Mara clung to those words now, letting them anchor her as the stones rained down and the noose grew heavier against her throat. She would not give these people the satisfaction of seeing her break. Sheriff Tate cleared his throat, unfolding a crumpled piece of paper with trembling hands. "Mara of the Blackfoot tribe," he began, his voice barely rising above the crowd's murmurs. "You stand accused of murder, theft, and inciting violence against the good people of Eden's Hollow. The charges were lies. woven from fear and prejudice. But as Mara looked out at the sea of hostile faces, she realized the truth was irrelevant. These people needed someone to blame for their burned barns, their stolen horses, their sleepless nights. They needed a villain, and her Blackfoot blood made her the perfect one. A man pushed through the crowd, his face weathered and scarred from years of hard living. "She's probably the one who poisoned our cattle last spring," he shouted, his voice thick with venom. "Ever since her kind started creeping closer to town, nothing's been right." The crowd murmured in agreement, their fear twisting into a narrative that justified their hatred. Mara wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. Who spent her days gathering herbs and praying for her people's survival, accused of poisoning cattle. But the noose around her neck reminded her that this was no laughing matter. The man's accusation was a spark, and the crowd was dry tinder, ready to ignite. Sheriff Tate's hand hovered near the lever that would open the trapdoor beneath Mara's feet. His fingers shook so badly she wondered if he'd manage to pull it when the moment came. Part of her pitied him, this man who knew deep down that this was wrong, but lacked the courage to stop it. The crowd's chants grew louder, more insistent. "Hang her! Hang her!" The words pounded in Mara's ears, drowning out the sound of her own heartbeat. Then, from the edge of the square, came a new sound, steady, deliberate rhythm of hoofbeats. The crowd's chanting faltered as heads turned toward the approaching rider. A dust cloud rose from the dirt road leading into town, and through it emerged a figure on a chestnut mare. The horse was strong, its coat gleaming despite the dust, and the rider sat tall in the saddle, exuding a quiet authority that made the crowd's noise fade to a murmur. Elias Kane had arrived. Elias dismounted with a fluid grace, his boots hitting the ground with a thud that seemed to reverberate through the square. He was a lean man, not overly tall, but with a presence that made him seem larger. His dark hair was streaked with gray at the temples, and his eye sharp and piercing took in the scene with a clarity that suggested he missed nothing. He wore a faded duster coat, the kind favored by men who spent long days on the trail, and a revolver hung low on his hip, its grip worn from use. The crowd parted slightly as he approached, some recognizing him as the reclusive rancher who lived on the edge of the territory, a man who kept to himself but whose reputation for fairness and a quick draw pressed at him. "What's the meaning of this?" Elias's voice cut through the morning air like a blade, sharp and unyielding. He stopped a few paces from the platform, his gaze moving from Sheriff Tate to Mara, then to the crowd. His expression was unreadable, but there was a tension in his posture, like a coiled spring waiting to release. Sheriff Tate stepped forward, relief flickering across his face as if Elias's arrival offered a momentary reprieve. "Mr. Kane, sir, we were carrying out justice for Samuel Kerr's murder. This Blackfoot woman here, she's the one responsible." Elias's eyes narrowed as he looked up at Mara. For a moment, their gazes locked, and she saw something in his expression, not pity, not anger, but a kind of recognition, as if he saw her not as a symbol of her people, but as a person standing on the edge of death. "And what evidence do you have against her?" he asked, his voice calm, but carrying a weight that made the crowd shift uncomfortably. The scarred man who had accused Mara of poisoning cattle stepped forward, his chest puffed out with bravado. "Evidence. She's Blackfoot, ain't she? That's all the evidence we need. Her kind killed Kerr, stole his horses, burned his barn. She's probably here spying for the next raid." Elias turned his full attention to the man, and Mara watched as the scarred face paled under that steady stare. "So your evidence is her blood," Elias said, his tone deceptively mild. "That's what passes for justice in Eden's Hollow now." The man's hands clenched into fists. "You defending savages now, Kane? Maybe all that time alone on your ranch has made you soft toward their kind." The insult hung in the air, but Elias didn't flinch. Instead, he took a step closer, and the space between them crackled with unspoken danger. "Careful, Amos," Elias said, addressing the man by name. "I've buried better men than you for less." Mara's heart pounded as she watched the confrontation unfold. This stranger, Elias Kane, was risking his standing, perhaps his life, to challenge the mob's verdict. But why? She'd never met him, had no claim on his loyalty. Yet here he was, standing between her and a town thirsty for her blood. Sheriff Tate raised his hands, trying to calm the rising tension. Now, gentlemen, let's keep this civil. Mr. Kane, I understand your concerns, but the people of this town have spoken. They want justice for Care's family. Justice? Elias's laugh was sharp, cutting through the crowd's murmurs. You call this justice? Stringing up a woman based on nothing but fear and hate? The crowd erupted in angry shouts, their voices blending into a cacophony of accusation. A woman near the back, her face twisted with grief, called out, "She's one of them that burned our homes." Others joined in, their hatred reigniting. But Elias wasn't done. He turned to face the crowd, his eyes blazing with a fire that silenced their cries. "Has anyone asked her where she was when Kerr was killed?" he demanded, his voice rising over the noise. "Or are we just going to murder a woman because it's easier than finding the real killer?" The scarred man, Amos, sneered and took a step forward, his hand hovering near his gun. "You're awful quick to defend her, Kane. Makes a man wonder what your stake is in this." Elias's hand moved to his revolver, not drawing, but resting there, a silent warning. "I wouldn't, Amos," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Unless you're faster than me, and I'm betting you're not." The crowd fell silent, the kind of hush that settles when violence is a heartbeat away. Mara watched from the platform, her breath catching as she realized this man was willing to kill to protect her. But why? What could she mean to him? Sheriff Tate's voice broke the tension, high and nervous. "Now, hold on, both of you. There's no need for gunplay. We're civilized people here." Civilized? Elias's gaze swept the crowd, his voice dripping with disdain. Civilized people don't lynch women without proof. They don't gather like wolves to watch someone die for the crime of being born different. A woman in a faded bonnet stepped forward, her face lined with grief. "Her people killed my brother," she said, her voice trembling. "They raided his farm, left him bleeding in the dirt. Don't talk to us about civilization when we're burying our kin." Mara's throat tightened. She knew that pain, had felt it when soldiers burned her uncle's camp years ago, leaving nothing but ash and sorrow. But pain didn't justify murder, and grief didn't turn lies into truth. "Mrs. Larson," Elias said, his tone softening, but his posture unyielding, "I'm sorry for your loss. But killing an innocent woman won't bring your brother back." "Innocent," Amos spat, his hand still near his gun. "She's Blackfoot. That makes her guilty of every raid her people ever pulled." Elias's eyes hardened. "By that logic, Amos, every white man here is guilty of every massacre committed by our soldiers. Should we hang you all for Sand Creek?" The comparison hit the crowd like a physical blow. Several people shifted uncomfortably, their eyes dropping to the ground. But the mob's anger wasn't fully extinguished. A young man, barely out of his teens, stepped forward, his voice shaking with bravado. "My pa says the only good Blackfoot is a dead one. Maybe it's time this town had a leader who gets that." Elias turned to face the boy, and Mara saw something dangerous flicker in his eyes. "Your pa teach you to murder women, too, son? Or did you come up with that courage all on your own?" The boy's face flushed red, his hand twitching toward the knife at his belt. But before he could act, another voice broke through the tensiona voice Mara hadn't expected. "Let her speak." It was Dr. Hannah Wells, the town's only physician, pushing through the crowd with her medical bag in hand. Her gray hair was pulled back tightly, and her sharp blue eyes scanned the scene with a mix of exhaustion and resolve. "Before we do something we can't take back, let's hear what she has to say." Amos laughed bitterly. "Since when do we listen to savages, Doc?" But Dr. Wells's words had shifted something in the crowd, like a breeze stirring a stagnant pond. Mara felt the change, subtle but real. Elias seized the moment. "The doctor's right. If you're going to take a life, you'd better be damn sure it's the right one." Sheriff Tate hesitated, his hand still near the lever. "I suppose we could hear her out, but that doesn't mean we cut her down. No one should have to defend themselves with a noose around their neck," Elias said, his voice firm. He stepped closer to the platform, his eyes meeting Mara's. "Cut her down, Tate, or I'll do it myself. And if I have to." Amos might find himself explaining to his maker why he thought drawing on me was a good idea. The sheriff's hands shook as he climbed the platform steps. Mara felt the rope loosen around her neck, the weight lifting like a miracle. When Tate cut the bonds around her wrists, blood rushed back into her hands, stinging like fire. She rubbed them, her eyes never leaving Elias. "Tell us where you were when Samuel Kerr was killed," Elias said, his voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of urgency. Mara looked out at the crowd, their faces a mix of hatred, doubt, and curiosity. "Doctor," Wells nodded encouragingly, while Amos scowled, his hand still hovering near his gun. "I was 20 miles east," Mara said, her voice clear despite the ordeal, "at my family's camp near Redstone Creek, tending to my father. He's been sick with a fever for weeks." "Convenient," Amos sneered. "Got any witnesses to back that up? Or do Blackfoot just expect us to take their word?" "Doctor." Wells stepped forward, her expression thoughtful. "What kind of fever? Describe his symptoms." Mara met the doctor's gaze, grateful for the chance to be heard. "He burned hot for days, couldn't keep food down. His skin was pale, and he shivered even under blankets. I used willow bark tea and kept him near the fire to sweat it out." "Doctor." Wells nodded slowly. "Sounds like typhoid fever. Most folks around here wouldn't know to use willow bark for that. Did you add anything else?" "Cedar leaf poultices for his chest," Mara said, "and sage tea when his throat swelled." The doctor's eyebrows rose. "That's proper medicine, not just superstition. She knows what she's doing." She turned to the crowd. "This woman's a healer, not a killer." Amos wasn't convinced. "So she knows some herbs. That doesn't prove she wasn't raiding Kerr's ranch." Elias stepped closer to the platform. "What's your father's name? Where exactly was your camp?" "His name is Walks with Stars," Mara said. "We were camped by the bend in Redstone Creek, where the cottonwoods grow thick. There's a flat rock there, shaped like a bear's paw." Her words were specific, vivid, carrying the weight of truth. A murmur rippled through the crowd, and Mara sensed their certainty beginning to crack. But doubt in a mob could be as dangerous as conviction. People didn't like being wrong, especially when they'd worked themselves up for blood. Then a new voice spoke up, rough and weathered. "She's telling the truth about Redstone Creek." A grizzled trapper, his face half hidden by a battered hat, pushed through the crowd. "Name's Silas Reed. I was trapping beaver up that way last week. Saw a Blackfoot woman tending to an old man by that creek, near a rock just like she described. Didn't bother them, and they didn't bother me." Amos's face twisted with frustration. "One witness don't prove nothing. Maybe she was planning raids between nursing duties." Elias turned to Mara, his expression softening slightly. "What's your full name, miss?" "Mara Elk Runner," she said, meeting his gaze without flinching. "Miss Elk Runner," Elias said, his voice carrying across the square. "I believe you're innocent of these charges." The crowd erupted in shouts, some angry, some uncertain. But beneath the noise, Mara heard the faint sound of doubt taking root, like seeds scattered on fertile ground. Elias Kane had given her a chance, but the mob's hunger for vengeance wasn't sated yet. And as Amos's hand twitched toward his gun, Mara knew this wasn't over. The morning sun climbed higher over Eden's Hollow, casting long shadows that stretched across the muddy square like fingers reaching for justice. The crowd's anger, momentarily quelled by Silas Reed's testimony and Elias Kane's defiance, began to simmer again, fueled by Amos's venomous words. Mara Elk Runner stood on the gallows platform, her wrists still raw from the hemp ropes that had bound them moments ago, the noose now a loose coil at her feet. Her heart pounded, but she kept her gaze steady, fixed on Elias, who stood like a lone sentinel between her and the mob. The air was thick with tension, the kind that could ignite with a single wrong move. Amos, the scarred man who'd been the loudest voice for her execution, wiped sweat from his brow, his hand still hovering near his revolver. His eyes darted between Elias and the crowd, searching for allies to bolster his crumbling narrative. "You're all being played," he shouted, his voice hoarse but defiant. "This Blackfoot woman's got you fooled with her sob story, and Kane here's helping her spin it. What's your game, Elias? You sweet on her or just looking to stir trouble?" The accusation landed like a spark in dry grass. Whispers rippled through the crowd, crude and suspicious. A man in a tattered vest muttered, "Maybe Kane's got reasons we don't know about." A woman nearby nodded, her lips curling in disgust. "Ain't natural, a white man defending her kind like that." The mob's doubt, briefly stirred by Silas's testimony, was twisting into something uglier, a new excuse to cling to their hatred. Elias's face remained stone cold, but Mara saw a flicker of anger in his eyes, a shadow of something personal and deep. He took a step toward Amos, his voice low and dangerous. "You're treading on thin ice, Amos. Keep talking, and you'll find out how quick I can end this conversation." Amos smirked, sensing the crowd's shifting mood. "You don't scare me, Cain. You think you can waltz into town, play hero, and walk away clean? These folks want justice for Samuel Kerr, and they ain't gonna let some Blackfoot-loving rancher stop them." The crowd roared, their voices swelling with renewed fury. "Hang her," a man shouted from the back. "She's guilty, Blackfoot or not," others joined in, their chants growing louder, more desperate, as if they could drown out their own doubts with noise. Mara's stomach twisted. She'd seen mobs before, soldiers who burned her people's camps, settlers who drove her kin from their hunting grounds. This was no different. Fear and grief had twisted these people into something monstrous, and she was their scapegoat. Sheriff Tate, still standing near the platform, raised his hands for silence, his face pale and slick with sweat. "Now, hold on, folks. Let's not lose our heads. Mr. Cain's raised some fair points, and Silas here says he saw her miles away. Maybe we need to think this through." "Think it through, Mrs. Larson," the woman who'd spoken of her brother's death, stepped forward, her voice trembling with rage. "My brother's dead, Sheriff. His blood's on Blackfoot hands, and you're telling us to think. This woman's one of them. She's got no place among decent folk." Mara wanted to scream the truth, that she'd never raised a hand against anyone, that her people were as much victims of the raids as the settlers were, but she knew words alone wouldn't sway this crowd. They'd made up their minds long before they dragged her to this gallows. Her only hope was Elias, and perhaps Dr. Wells, whose calm presence still held a sliver of the crowd's respect. Elias turned to Mrs. Larson, his voice softer but firm. "Ma'am, I know your pain. I've lost kin myself, seen what grief can do to a heart. But killing this woman won't bring your brother back. It'll only stain your hands with innocent blood." "Innocent," Amos spat, stepping closer to Elias. "You keep throwing that word around, Cain, but you ain't got proof she's innocent any more than we got proof she's guilty. She's Blackfoot, and that's enough for me." Elias's hand twitched toward his revolver, but before he could respond, a new sound cut through the chaos, a high, desperate cry that stopped everyone in their tracks. "Stop! Please, stop!" A girl, no older than 14, pushed through the crowd, her face streaked with tears and dirt. Her blonde hair was tangled, her dress torn at the hem, and she clutched a small, worn satchel to her chest as if it were her lifeline. The crowd parted, stunned by her sudden appearance, and even Amos froze, his hand still near his gun. Sheriff Tate's eyes widened. Clara Kerr, what in God's name are you doing here, child? You should be home with your mother." Clara Kerr, the daughter of the murdered Samuel Kerr, stood trembling in the center of the square, her chest heaving as she fought to catch her breath. "You can't hang her," she gasped, her voice breaking. "She didn't kill my pa. I saw who did." The words hit the crowd like a thunderclap. Silence fell, heavy and absolute, as every eye turned to the girl. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Mara's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. This child, whose father's death had sparked this lynching, was defending her. It made no sense, yet there she stood, tears streaming down her face, her small frame shaking with the weight of what she was about to say. Dr. Wells stepped forward, her voice gentle but urgent. "Clara, sweetheart, tell us what you saw. Take your time." Clara's eyes darted to Mara, then back to the crowd. "Pa and I were out by the north fence, fixing a break in the wire, when we heard horses coming. Pa told me to hide in the brush, said it might be trouble. I did what he said, but I saw everything." Her voice cracked, and she clutched the satchel tighter. "It wasn't Blackfoot who killed him. It was white men, 3 of them, wearing masks. They shot Pa and took his horses. They made it look like a Blackfoot raid, but I saw their faces when one of them pulled his mask off to wipe his sweat." The crowd erupted in murmurs, some shocked, others skeptical. Amos's face twisted with rage. The girl's confused. She's grieving, making things up. "Blackfoot killed her pa, plain as day." "I know what I saw," Clara shouted, her voice rising with a strength that belied her age. One of them had a limp, walked like his left leg was stiff. Another had a tattoo on his arm, a snake coiled around a dagger. They weren't Blackfoot. They were white men, and they laughed while they stole our horses. Mara's mind raced. Clara's description was specific, vivid, the kind of detail that couldn't be invented by a grieving child. The crowd's mood shifted again, doubt creeping into their anger like cracks in a dam. Mrs. Larson's face softened, her eyes searching Clara's as if hoping for a truth that could ease her pain. But Amos wasn't ready to let go of his narrative. "This is nonsense," he bellowed. "Blackfoot or white men working with Blackfoot, it don't matter. She's one of them, and she's gotta pay." Elias stepped forward, his voice cutting through Amos's rant like a knife. "You're reaching, Amos. Face it, you were about to lynch an innocent woman based on nothing but your own prejudice." Amos's hand moved toward his gun, his face red with fury. "You calling me a liar, Kane? Maybe you're in on this, protecting her for reasons we don't know." The accusation was a match to gunpowder. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, some shouting in support of Amos, others looking to Elias with uncertainty. Mara saw the danger in Elias's eyes, a man pushed to his limit, ready to draw if Amos made the wrong move. She braced herself, knowing blood was about to spill. But before either man could act, Clara's voice rang out again. "Wait." She opened her satchel and pulled out a small, tarnished Objectus silver pocket knife with intricate engravings. "This was Pa's. One of the men dropped it when they were loading the horses. It's not Blackfoot. It's the kind of knife a white man carries, fancy-like, with a bone handle." "Doctor." Wells took the knife from Clara, examining it closely. "She's right," the doctor said, holding it up for the crowd to see. "This is a gentleman's knife, not something you'd find in a Blackfoot camp. Machine carved, probably from back east." The crowd's murmurs grew louder, the tide of their anger turning to confusion. Silas Reed, the trapper, stepped forward again, his weathered face grim. "There's more you folks need to hear," he said, reaching into his coat. He pulled out a small bundle wrapped in cloth and unwrapped it to reveal a brass belt buckle, scratched but distinctive, with a star-shaped design. "Found this near Redstone Creek, not far from where I saw Miss Elk Runner with her father. It was in a white men's camp, judging by the tracks and the coffee cans they left behind." "Mrs. Larson gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "That's Samuel's buckle. He wore it every day, said it was a gift from his pa." Silas nodded. "Found it with other Thingstalin goods, likely from Care's ranch and others. These weren't Blackfoot camps. Whoever's been raiding these homesteads is framing the Blackfoot to cover their tracks." The implications hit the crowd like a tidal wave. If Clara and Silas were telling the truth, not only was Mara innocent, but the real killers were still out there, manipulating the town's fear to escape justice. Sheriff Tate's face went ashen, his hands trembling as he clutched the crumpled paper with Mara's charges. This changes things," he stammered. "Changes nothing," Amos roared, his voice desperate now. "She's still Blackfoot, still dangerous. Even if she didn't kill Kerr, her people are raiders, murderers." Clara stepped forward, her small frame trembling but her voice steady. "My pa taught me to judge folks by their deeds, not their blood. This woman didn't hurt him. She doesn't deserve to die for it." Mara's eyes stung with tears she refused to let fall. This child, who had every reason to hate her, was showing more courage than the entire town combined. The crowd's anger faltered, replaced by a heavy silence as they grappled with the truth. But Amos wasn't done. His face twisted with rage. He raised his gun toward Mara, his voice a snarl. "If nobody else has the guts to do what's right, I will." Elias moved like lightning, his revolver clearing leather before Amos could aim. The metallic click of the hammer echoed across the square, freezing everyone in place. "Drop it, Amos," Elias said, his voice calm but deadly. "Next man who threatens Miss Elk Runner answers to me." Amos's hand shook, his gun still raised. The crowd held its breath, the air thick with the promise of violence. Sheriff Tate stepped between them, his own gun drawn, but pointed at the ground. "Enough. Both of you, stand down. We're not having a shootout in the middle of town." Elias didn't lower his gun, but his eyes flicked to Mara, then back to Amos. "You heard the sheriff. Drop it, or I'll make sure you don't get the chance to regret it." Amos's face contorted with fury, but he saw the resolve in Elias's eyes. Slowly, reluctantly, he lowered his gun, letting it fall to the mud. The crowd exhaled, the tension breaking like a snapped rope. "Doctor." Wells approached the platform, her voice steady. "Miss Elk Runner, I speak for many here when I say we owe you an apology. This town's been wrong, terribly wrong." Sheriff Tate nodded, his shoulders sagging with relief. "You're free to go, Miss Elk Runner. I'm sorry for what we put you through." Mara stepped down from the platform, her legs unsteady, but her head held high. The crowd parted as she moved, some avoiding her gaze, others muttering apologies under their breath. Clara Kerr approached her, still clutching the satchel. "Miss," she said softly, "I'm sorry for what they did to you. Pa would have been ashamed of this town today." Mara looked down at the girl, her heart heavy with gratitude and sorrow. "Thank you, Clara. Your father sounds like he was a good man." Elias holstered his gun, his eyes scanning the crowd for any lingering threats. He turned to Mara, his voice low. "Those raiders are still out there, Miss Elk Runner. They're killing folks and letting your people take the blame. This isn't over." Mara met his gaze, her own resolve hardening. "Then we need to find them." 3 hours later, Mara, Elias, and Clara rode north toward Redstone Creek, following the trail Silas Reed had described. Sheriff Tate had reluctantly deputized Elias after Dr. Wells convinced the town council that catching the real killers was more urgent than soothing their wounded pride. Clara had insisted on coming, her young face set with determination. "Those men killed my pa," she'd said, her voice unwavering. "I want to see them face justice." Mara knew the hills like the lines of her own hands. Her people had lived here for generations, reading the land's secrets in the bend of a branch, the shift of a pebble. The trail was faint, but clear hoofprints in soft earth, a broken twig here, a scuff mark there. 3 men, she said, crouching to study the tracks, heading toward Blackthorn Ridge. "There's a cave there, hidden by brush. Good place to hole up." Elias checked his rifle, his eyes scanning the horizon. "Think they know we're coming?" "Not yet," Mara said, standing. "But they will soon. Their careless left a fire smoldering back there." She pointed to a faint wisp of smoke rising from the ridge ahead. "They think they're safe, that everyone's still blaming the Blackfoot." Clara's hands tightened on her horse's reins, her young face pale but resolute. "They laughed when they shot Pa," she whispered, like it was a game. Mara's heart ached for the girl, but she kept her focus on the trail. Grief could wait, justice couldn't. As they approached the ridge, Mara signaled for silence. Below, in a small clearing near the cave's mouth, she saw the raiders camp 3 men lounging around a low fire, their stolen goods stacked nearby. One man limped as he tossed a stick into the flames. Another, his sleeve rolled up, revealed a tattoo of a snake coiled around a dagger. "That's them," Clara whispered, her voice trembling with rage and fear. Elias studied the camp, his eyes narrowing. 2 ways into that clearing. We can take them from both sides, cut off their escape." Mara shook her head. "Let me go in first. They'll see a Blackfoot woman, think I'm alone, vulnerable. It'll give you time to get into position." Elias frowned. "Too risky. If they recognize you." "They won't," Mara said, her voice steady. "To men like them, all Blackfoot look the same. Besides, they think I'm dead, hanged in your town square." Elias hesitated, then nodded. "Be careful. We'll be watching." 20 minutes later, Mara walked her horse slowly into the clearing. Her posture slumped to faint exhaustion. She'd loosened her hair further, letting it fall over her face, and carried a small bundle of herbs to complete the ruse of a lost traveler. The raiders looked up as she approached, their hands moving to their weapons but relaxing when they saw her. "Well, look at this," the limping man said, his voice dripping with mockery. "Lost little Blackfoot girl, wandering all alone. You looking for water, sweetheart?" Mara kept her eyes down, speaking in halting English. "Water for horse, please." The tattooed man laughed, leaning back against a crate of stolen goods. "Sure, we got water, but maybe you can tell us where your people's camps are. We're real curious about Blackfoot business." Mara's heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral. She could feel Elias and Clara positioning themselves on the ridge above, their rifles trained on the camp. She needed to keep the raiders distracted just a little longer. "I don't know camps," she said, feigning confusion. "Just looking for water." The limping man stood, his grin fading. "Don't play dumb with us, girl. We know your kind. Always sneaking around, planning raids." Mara dropped the act, her voice turning cold as steel. "The only raiders here are you. Samuel Kerr's blood is on your hands, and it ends today." The raiders froze, their hands reaching for their guns, but Mara was faster. She dove behind a crate as Elias's rifle cracked from the ridge, the bullet striking the limping man's shoulder. He cried out, dropping his weapon. The tattooed man drew his pistol, but Clara's shot wild but close sent him scrambling for cover. The third raider tried to run, but Mara tackled him. Her knife pressed to his throat before he could shout. Within moments, it was over. The raiders were bound, their stolen goods saddles, tools, and Kerr's engraved pocket piled as evidence. Clara approached the limping man, her eyes blazing. "You killed my pa," she said, her voice steady despite her tears. "You're going to answer for it." As they prepared to transport the raiders back to Eden's Hollow, Clara handed Mara the pocket knife. "This was Pa's," she said. "He'd want you to have it, for proving the truth." Mara took the knife, her throat tight. In all her years, no settler had shown her such trust. "Thank you, Clara," she said. "Your father would be proud of you." Back in Eden's Hollow, the raiders were locked in the town jail, awaiting trial. Sheriff Tate, shaken by the day's events, issued a public apology to Mara and the Blackfoot people, promising to investigate all raids with evidence, not prejudice. Dr. Wells offered to teach Mara Western medicine, recognizing her skill as a healer. Elias, ever the quiet presence, donated funds to help Blackfoot families displaced by the settlers' retaliations. But Mara knew the fight wasn't over. The raiders had hinted at others, a larger network profiting from the chaos they sowed. As she and Elias sat by a campfire that night, planning their next move, she felt a spark of hope. Together, they could uncover the truth, protect both their peoples, and prove that courage could bridge even the deepest divides. The stars hung low over the Montana Territory, their cold light filtering through the pines as Mara Elk Runner, Elias Kane, and Clara Kerr camped on the edge of Blackthorn Ridge. The fire crackled softly, casting flickering shadows across their faces. The three bound raiders sat against a nearby tree, their wrists tied with rope, their faces sullen but defiant. The stolen goods saddles, tools, and Samuel Kerr's engraved pocket in a pile, mute evidence of their crimes. Mara's fingers traced the knife's bone handle, a gift from Clara, as she stared into the flames. The weight of the day's events pressed on her chest, but she felt a fire kindling within her, a determination to see this through, to uncover the truth behind the raids that had nearly cost her life. Elias sat across from her, cleaning his rifle with a practiced hand. His sharp eyes flicked toward the prisoners every few moments, ensuring they made no sudden moves. Clara, curled up in a blanket, clutched her father's satchel, her young face set with a resolve that belied her 14 years. The girl had seen too much for her father's murder, a town's blind hatred, and now the truth about the men who'd framed Mara's people. Yet she hadn't wavered, not when she'd faced the mob in Eden's Hollow, not when she'd fired her rifle at the raiders' camp. Mara admired her courage, even as it broke her heart to see a child carry such a burden. "We've got them," Elias said, his voice low, breaking the silence. "But they're not the whole story. Men like these don't plan raids this clean on their own. Someone's pulling their strings." Mara nodded, her eyes narrowing as she studied the prisoners. The limping man, who'd called himself Jed, glared back, his jaw tight. The tattooed man, Rory, kept his gaze on the ground, while the third, a weary fellow named Cal, shifted nervously, as if expecting rescue or retribution. "They mentioned a boss," Mara said, recalling their taunts in the clearing. "Someone they report to. Said he'd make things right if they got caught." Clara's head snapped up. "They said that? When?" "When I walked into their camp," Mara replied. "Jed there laughed about it, said their boss would have the town eating out of his hand, no matter what we did." Elias set his rifle down, his expression hardening. "Sounds like someone with influence, someone who knows how to play on the town's fears, keep the blame on the Blackfoot." Mara's mind raced. Eden's Hollow was a small town, but it had its share of powerful men merchants, ranchers, even politicians who'd come west to make their fortunes. Someone was orchestrating the raids, profiting from the chaos, and using the settlers' prejudice to cover their tracks. "We need to know who," she said. "If we take these men back to town without finding their leader, he'll just find others to do his dirty work." Elias nodded. "Agreed. We question them." Now, he stood, his tall frame casting a long shadow as he approached the prisoners. "Jed," he said, crouching to meet the limping man's glare, "you're in a bad spot. 3 counts of murder, theft, and who knows what else. Sheriff Tate's not known for mercy. But if you tell us who's behind this, maybe we can put in a word for you." Jed spat into the dirt, his eyes blazing. "You think I'm scared of you, Kane? Or that Blackfoot witch? My boss'll have this town in his pocket before you can blink. You're wasting your time." Rory, the tattooed man, shifted uncomfortably. "Shut up, Jed," he muttered. "You'll get us all killed." "Killed?" Elias seized on the word, his voice sharp. "By who? Your boss? What's his name?" Cal, the weary one, glanced nervously at his companions, his hands twitching against the ropes. Mara caught the movement, her healer's instincts kicking in. Fear wasn't just in his eyes, it was in the way his shoulders hunched, the way his breath came to fast. He knew something, and he was terrified of what would happen if he spoke. Mara stood, brushing dirt from her skirt, and approached Cal. She kept her voice soft, the way she spoke to her father when his fever made him restless. "Cal, you don't strike me as a killer. You're caught up in something bigger than you, aren't you? Tell us who's giving the orders. We can protect you." Cal's eyes darted to Jed, then back to Mara. "You don't know what he's like," he whispered. "He'll kill me. He'll kill my family." "Who?" Elias pressed, his tone firm but not unkind. "Give us a name, and we'll make sure he can't touch you." Jed lunged against his ropes, his face red with fury. "Keep your mouth shut, Cal. You say one word, and you're dead." Clara sprang to her feet, her young voice cutting through the night. "You don't get to threaten him. You killed my pa, and I want to know who told you to do it." She clutched the satchel, her knuckles white, tears glinting in her eyes. Cal flinched, his resolve crumbling under the weight of Clara's pain. It's Hargrove," he stammered. "Nathan Hargrove. He runs the trading post in town. He's the one who planned the raids, told us where to hit, how to make it look like Blackfoot work." The name hit Mara like a stone. Nathan Hargrove was one of Eden's Hollow's most respected Mina wealthy merchant, who supplied the town with everything from flour to firearms. He'd been at the gallows that morning, standing quietly at the back of the crowd, his face unreadable. Mara had assumed he was just another settler hungry for justice. Now, she realized, he'd been watching to ensure his plan succeeded. Elias's jaw tightened. "Hargrove? You're sure?" Cal nodded, his voice barely a whisper. "He's got men all over the territory. Pays us to steal livestock, goods, anything he can sell through his post. Says the Blackfoot make the perfect scapegoat, keeps the town riled up, keeps the militia busy chasing shadows." Jed snarled, straining against his ropes. "You idiot, Cal. You've signed our death warrants." Mara ignored him, her mind racing. Hargrove's trading post was the heart of Eden's Hollow, a place where every settler passed through. He'd built his fortune on their trust, all while orchestrating the chaos that tore their lives apart. And he'd nearly succeeded in having her hanged to keep his secret safe. "We need proof," Elias said, standing. "If we ride into town accusing Hargrove without evidence, the town will turn on us faster than they turned on Mara." Clara's eyes lit up. "The satchel," she said, holding it out. "Pa kept records of his dealings with Hargrove. Said he didn't trust him, thought he was shorting him on payments for cattle. Maybe there's something in here." Mara took the satchel, her fingers trembling as she opened it. Inside were a few papers, crumpled but legible ledgers of transactions, notes in Samuel Care's neat hand. One entry caught her eye, a sale of 10 horses to Hargrove, dated a week before Care's death. With a note scrawled in the margin, Hargrove paid half, said rest comes after next shipment. "Don't trust him." Another paper listed dates and locations of raids, eerily matching the attacks blamed on the Blackfoot. "This is it," Mara said, holding up the papers. "Kerr was onto Hargrove. That's why they killed him. Elias scanned the documents, his expression grim. "This'll help, but it's not enough. We need to catch Hargrove with his hands dirty, something the town can't ignore." Mara nodded, her mind already turning to the cave on Blackthorn Ridge. "Their camp," she said. "They had more stolen goods there, things Hargrove hasn't moved yet. If we can link them to his trading post, it'll prove Cal's story." Elias glanced at the prisoners. "We take them back to town, lock them up, then head to the cave. Clara, you stay with Sheriff Tate. It's too dangerous for you to come." Clara's eyes flashed. "Those men killed my pa. I'm not staying behind. I want to see this through." Mara placed a hand on Clara's shoulder. "You've done enough, Clara. Your courage saved my life today. Let us finish this for your pa." Clara hesitated, then nodded, her shoulders sagging. "Just make sure Hargrove pays." By dawn, they were back in Eden's Hollow. Sheriff Tate, still shaken from the near lynching, locked the raiders in the jail, his hands steadier now that he had a clear enemy. Dr. Wells met them at the sheriff's office, her gray hair pulled back, her eyes sharp with determination. "I've been going through my own records," she said, holding up a ledger. "Hargrove's been buying medical supplies from more than a town this size needs. I thought he was reselling to minors, but now I'm wondering if he's been stocking his raiders." Elias nodded. "It's a start. We're heading to Blackthorn Ridge to search their camp. If we find Hargrove's goods there, we've got him." Tate hesitated, his face pale. "Hargrove's got friends in high places. If you're wrong about this, the town will come for you both." "Then we won't be wrong," Mara said, her voice steady. She felt the weight of the pocket knife in her pocket, a reminder of Clara's trust, and it fueled her resolve. The ride back to Blackthorn Ridge was tense, the morning air thick with mist. Mara led the way, her knowledge of the land guiding them through hidden trails. Elias rode beside her, his rifle slung across his back, his eyes scanning the horizon. "You didn't have to do this," Mara said quietly. "Risk your life for me, a stranger." Elias's gaze softened, but he kept his focus on the trail. "I've seen too many innocents pay for others' crimes. My sister, she was killed in a raid years ago. White men, not natives, but the town blamed the Crow anyway. I couldn't save her, but I can damn well make sure it doesn't happen again." Mara's throat tightened. His pain mirrored her own loss, injustice, the weight of a world that judged by blood rather than deeds. "I'm sorry," she said, "and thank you." He nodded, a silent acknowledgement, and they rode on. At the cave, they found what they'd hoped for and more. Crates stamped with Hargrove's trading postmark were stacked against the walls, filled with stolen goods, saddles, tools, even a silver watch Mara recognized from a settler's home burned in a raid. But the real find was a ledger, hidden beneath a pile of blankets, listing payments to J.R. and C for services rendered. The amounts matched the raid's dates, and Hargrove's initials were scrawled at the bottom of each page. "This is it," Elias said, holding up the ledger. "Enough to hang him." Mara's heart pounded. "We need to get this to Tate before Hargrove hears we're onto him." But as they turned to leave, a shadow moved at the cave's entrance. A man stepped into the light, his revolver drawn, his face cold and calculating. Nathan Hargrove himself, flanked by 2 hired guns. "I was wondering when you'd show up," he said, his voice smooth as oil. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for, Miss Elk Runner. And you, Kenway, sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." Elias raised his rifle, but Hargrove's men were quick, their guns trained on him and Mara. "Drop it," Hargrove said, "or you both die right here." Mara's mind raced. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and miles from help. But she'd faced death once today and come out standing. "You can't kill us and expect the town to believe your lies," she said, her voice steady. "Clara saw your men. Cal's talking. The truth's out, Hargrove." Hargrove laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "The truth. This town eats lies for breakfast. They'll believe what I tell them, that you and Kane were working with the Blackfoot, planning more raids. I'll be the hero who stopped you." Elias's eyes flicked to Mara, a silent signal. She nodded slightly, her hand inching toward the pocket knife. "You're wrong," she said, keeping Hargrove's attention. "Clara's got your number. So does Dr. Wells, and Sheriff Tate's not as spineless as you think." Hargrove's smile faltered, just for a moment, and that was all they needed. Mara threw the pocket knife, its blade catching one of Hargrave's men in the shoulder. He yelped, his gun dropping, and Elias fired, dropping the second man with a shot to the leg. Hargrave dove for cover, but Mara was on him, tackling him to the ground. Her years of hauling wood and tending horses gave her the strength to pin him, her knee pressing into his chest. "You're done," she said, her voice fierce. "No more lies. No more blood." Elias bound Hargrave's hands, his face grim. "Let's get him back to town." The trial in Eden's Hollow was swift but fair. The ledger, the stolen goods, and Cal's testimony painted a clear picture of Hargrave's scheme. He'd orchestrated the raids to drive up prices at his trading post, using the town's fear of the Blackfoot to deflect suspicion. The crowd that had once screamed for Mara's blood now turned on Hargrave, their anger redirected at the man who'd manipulated their grief. He was sentenced to hang, along with his surviving men, though Mara took no joy in it. Justice wasn't about vengeance, it was about truth. Sheriff Tate issued a formal apology to the Blackfoot, promising new policies to ensure evidence-based investigations. Dr. Wells began working with Mara, teaching her Western medicine while learning Blackfoot healing techniques in return. Clara, now an orphan, was taken in by a kind family in town, but she visited Mara often. Their bond forged in shared loss and courage. Elias remained a quiet presence, helping rebuild trust between the settlers and the Blackfoot. He and Mara worked together to return stolen goods to their rightful owners, both native and settler. One evening, as they sat by Redstone Creek, Mara handed him the pocket knife. "You should have this," she said, "for standing with me when no one else would." Elias shook his head, closing her fingers around the knife. "Keep it. It's a reminder that truth can cut through hate, if you're brave enough to wield it." Mara smiled, the first real smile she'd felt in days. The road ahead would be hard. Prejudice didn't die overnight, and the wounds of the past would linger. But with allies like Elias and Clara, and the strength of her own heart, Mara knew they could build a future where justice was blind to blood. As the sun set over the hills, casting a golden glow across the land, Mara felt her father's words echo in her mind. Courage is standing tall when fear tries to bend you. She'd stood tall, and in doing so, she'd changed a town's heart, one truth at a time.